Welcome to We Flew Off the Page. I'm Muhammad Seven, and I'm here to do my very favorite thing in the world. Talk to great songwriters about how they do what they do. Each episode we'll dive into the little details of two of my guests' songs, which I'll play for you. The songwriter has chosen one of their songs, and I have agonized over it and selected the other from their catalog of incredible music. Today's show is sponsored by Composition Notebooks. Composition Notebooks feature a black and white camouflaged cover for those days when you just want to get lost in a herd of Holstein cows and pen your next masterpiece undisturbed. With a wide rule and 100 sheets of paper, you won't run out of space for your new songs, grocery lists, anxious journal entries, set lists, doodle art, and signature practice if you stick to a good old composition notebook. Get yours at a drugstore, or if you've got kids, you can steal one of their old ones. I guarantee about 9/10 of it is blank. My guest today is songwriter, performer, and producer Mirah Yom-Tov Zeitlin, mostly known by her first name, Mirah. She's recorded 7 albums and 6 EPs over her 25-year career. In that time, she's toured widely and amassed a huge and devoted fan base. Mirah, welcome to We Flew Off the Page.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, when did you write your first song, and do you remember that song?
Well, so there's a funny outlier, which is that at a certain point after I had started writing songs and recording them, I was going through old boxes at the house where I grew up in, and I found it was just a piece of paper that my mom had written. So she had apparently transcribed what I told her was a song. And it was I wrote it. I think it was I love you, egg in my hand, and so apparently I wrote that song when I was 4 years old, and I did record that in a class at the Evergreen State College when I was in college, for an assignment. But fast forward years later, when I also was at Evergreen, and in the I was taking a class that was it was like music, dance, and theater class, and for the music part, I had an assignment to write a song, and I sort of could play a couple chords on the guitar, could sort of stumble through a 3-chord song. But I didn't really play yet. But I was like, okay, I'll write a song. And so that song, that I consider that really my first song. And I think it was called Carved in It. And it was a really big hit with the class. Everybody was like, wow, that was great. And I was like, oh, cool. Maybe this is something that I'm good at. And then it sort of progressed from there.
Wow. Was that kind of your moment that launched you?
It was definitely the moment where, I mean, I listened to music my whole life. I always and as I listened, to music growing up, I always identified with the singer and the lyrics, and we always sang in my family. My dad was a great singer, and so there was something specific about like lyrics, melody, lead singer that was like that's what I connected to in the music. And I mean, it was like many years later where I was like, oh, I can hear the bass line. That was like I sort of taught myself to listen to all the parts of the music years later, because for all of my growing up, I was just listening to the lead singer.
Right.
Which maybe a lot of people do. I don't know. But that moment in class when I wrote the song, and it was easy. It sort of came naturally, and it was fun, and people liked it. So the combination of those factors really made it like, okay, I think I will keep doing this, because it's fun and I like it and I'm good at it and other people like it too.
What a cool story. I think a kind of an unusual story,
I
from most of most of us,
it
right?
was an assignment from class,
Yeah,
but
sure. I mean, I heard Carole King say she wrote 100 awful songs before any of what uh,
which
started
I
working.
hardly believe. I'm sure that what she deems as an awful song is still just like has the best hook, and you know, because
You
she's
make
Carole
an
King.
you make an excellent point that it's hard to know what of all of this information to believe, but I can speak from personal experience that I
Yeah.
wrote. My first song did not result in bolstering my own confidence, which I really wish it had, and I'm so glad it did for you. So
Uh-huh.
it's a great story. Uh, so I tend to think every song starts with what I'll call a kernel of inspiration, and that could be anything: a turn of phrase, an idea, a feeling, a chord progression. Um, do you tend to start writing songs a particular way, or does it vary a lot?
Um, I think it tends to be I think there is a way that I do it. This is what I think it is. I mean, honestly, the whole thing is totally mysterious, and I don't feel whenever I've been asked the question when it's phrased like like what's your songwriting process, or like, how, like I I'm like, I don't know if I have a process. It's more like an allowing, and
Mm, mm.
I um really it the the ingredient that is absolutely required is like quiet space and time of just me.
Yeah.
And which is also why in the past few years of like having a young child and the pandemic, it's not been a very productive time for like songwriting
Totally.
for me. But I think the way and what I found, from that very first time when I got the assignment in class, I did sit down with a guitar, even though I hardly knew how to play it.
Hmm.
But a guitar is a pretty great songwriting tool as a sort of like a physical object to focus, to like have physical focus with, have a little bit of like sounds. So it's just me, and I'm not speaking or singing or thinking yet, but I can make some sounds happen. And there's something that starts working when there's like a little bit of sounds playing. Oh, what about this sound? So it's like I engage my brain with the sounds from the guitar, and then it's really just like I have rarely had an idea like I want to write a song about such and such, and then I pick up the guitar. I've rarely, if ever, done that.
Mm.
Um, Even when I have assignments, like actually the song Jerusalem that's on my third full length album, Come On Miracle,
I know
that
it
was an
well.
assignment.
Oh wow.
I mean, assigned, I was so commissioned. I wasn't going to get paid, so I don't know if does the word commission necessarily mean that you're getting paid for it, or
I
just
don't,
means someone like kind of asks you to do something. So
we'll go with that.
I was asked to write a song for a Hanukkah compilation,
Oh,
and actually,
wow.
and David Shearwater was very instrumental in me sort of thinking about the story of Hanukkah and the real story,
Oh,
and that it's
wow.
not just this cutesy story with I mean, really, it was like there was a war. Like people were dying, people were killing each other. It was bloody, like the temple was destroyed. Um, and I took that some steps further. But in any case, I'm kind of rambling as I do. Um,
This is great.
which is also part of the songwriting process. It's like like not stopping my brain. It's just like gonna keep going, and it's brain and heart, it's emotion and it's thought. And so I'll finish that story though.
Please.
Um so the I was asked to write a song for a Hanukkah compilation, and so in a way there was this idea that was posed to me, but I didn't know that what I was going to end up writing was a sort of like, you know, um, anti-oppression, like anti-war song that was like, please, humans, we need to be kind to each other. Do not return harm with harm. Like, don't answer harm with harm. Heal
Mm.
yourself
Mm.
and be and heal the world.
Yeah.
Um, so I didn't know that that was the song I was going to write, even when I was sort of given an assignment or asked to write a specific thing. And um, so that's the example of how, like, I rarely, if ever, sit down to be like, well, I'm feeling really heartbroken right now, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to write a song about my sadness or my anger. It's
Yeah.
not it's not a um it's not that direct. And I think that that's why I like doing it so much, because I get to find out, I get to learn myself through the process of writing and creating, because I think that's maybe true for everyone. Like, we don't always
Mm.
know
Mm-hmm.
what exactly, even if it's right below the surface. So it's like you let it you let it bubble up. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've learned this in parenting a lot. Like,
Hmm.
because you're sort of helping your child also doesn't know. They know, they have fewer tools to know and understand exactly what is going on beneath the surface.
Mm-hmm.
So you're really like tuning into them so that they can let that little song out or identify what that little song is.
Mm-hmm.
um so I'm not sure if I answered your question. You said, is there a way that you generally write songs?
I mean, this is an incredible answer to my question. You're not sort of laying out a very specific this and then that formula, which is great. This is so interesting what you're saying. You're welcome to say a little more if you want.
I mean, it's also funny that the way that it made sense to me to answer the question is to start with what I do, what I don't do. Like, I don't start
Right.
off with the like, that this is the thought or the idea. I have to find the thought or idea, and in order to do that, I need to give myself the time and space to, like, get in there.
Yeah.
I also rarely I rarely start off with, like, the musical composition first.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I occasionally start off with a a phrase, the words, and then get out my guitar, or sometimes just start with an a cappella, just singing
Mm-hmm.
to find the melody for the words or the rhythm for the words.
Right.
And but yeah, I have heard people talk about, like, yeah, I like, first I record the song, what they call the song, then I write the words. And I'm like, wow, that doesn't that is not my way at all. you know
Yeah.
um and I mean, it's a cool way, really, because it just shows, like, I'm attached to language,
Yeah.
and I identify with language, and I think language is beautiful and powerful. I also identify with um, my voice, the voice that comes out of my body. It's this incredible, and this is true about everyone's voice. It's like there is no one else that has ever been or ever will be who has exactly your voice.
Mm-hmm.
you know, People can learn how to play other people's guitar solos.
Right.
You can do it. Um, I'm not saying that. like musicians and their musicality is replaceable or transferable. But I'm just saying that there is something that is particularly unique about each of our human voices.
Yeah.
And that means a lot to me.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, um, I like singing.
That's so interesting. You're describing one of my biggest challenges, I think, as a songwriter and as a performer in particular, is facing that reality that
Mm,
it's the me-ishness of my voice and my work that has the most value. And
mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of years um, trying to sound like other artists, um, comparing myself and worrying that I sort of, wasn't as good, blah, 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 things that so many of us do. And it took a long time for me to realize that it is the thing that I specifically am doing that no one can do but me.
Yeah,
Regardless of the particular qualities of it, if my vibrato is convincing or if my resonance or whatever the thing is, these are only,
yeah,
and back then I wouldn't have even known what to call the qualities that I felt critical of, self-critical of.
yeah.
Um, but it seems like you are really steeped in a certain a confidence or knowing about yourself of these things.
Yeah, or at least, I mean, like unfortunately, I wouldn't describe myself as being like steeped in self-confidence.
Oh.
I would love to be. I'm not, but I think that I just like I even though I I don't always feel like I don't always feel this feeling of confidence in my work, in my abilities, and all of these things. But when I am doing it and when it is authentic, it's like um, it's like this little like drink of ambrosia. It's like I am. It's sort of unifying for me to like unify with myself. And I've actually especially noticed that these last 2, 3, whatever, however long the pandemic has been going on, and I haven't toured at all. I've been playing like a one-off show every couple of months, every 3 or 4 months for the past almost 3 years, 2.5 years. At first I was only playing outdoor shows, and my kid wasn't vaccinated yet, and now I'm playing indoor shows, but really I'm not touring. So music has been a bit like on a like in the back seat. It's so there. Like I'm like, please be a backseat driver. But it's kind of in the back seat. But because I haven't been playing as much, when I do play those shows, and my partner Todd, he laughs at me because every time after the show, he's like, how was it? How did it feel? And I'm like, it was awesome. It was great. I felt so good because that's me sort of like spinning out the golden thread and consuming the golden thread in this beautiful like connected loop.
Mm.
And that is nourishing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so not doing it as frequently, I really notice how much I love it. And that there's something so special about that it's a performance so I'm connecting to other people. That actually.
Mm-hmm.
So this is interesting. I do not like to practice. I only practice 4 shows, and then so it's like I'm a songwriter. I like writing songs because writing songs is that spinning of the golden thread in the loop where I'm nourishing myself.
Yep.
That's happening while I'm writing, and that's also happening when I'm performing live and there's this audience involved. So it's like maybe a whole bunch of golden threads, and it feels so good. For some reason, unfortunately, I don't get that feeling when I'm like alone and like quote practicing. I get it
Right.
when I'm writing, but not when I'm like quote practicing. So I basically never practice. Um, don't tell any of the kids that. Um, but I do when I practice with other people, then I get to have it.
Sure.
So anyway, I've digressed from our. I think you asked me one question so far. Is that
It's true. I have. It's okay. I'm gonna. By
okay?
the way, I love the spinning and consuming of the golden thread. I'm gonna hold on to that. That's really amazing. Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned your song Jerusalem. I was going to ask a question kind of tailored to that song specifically, which is that one of the things I find interesting about your songs is they don't tend to strike me as self-consciously trying to be protest music, or political music, or whatever you want to call this. But at the same time, almost every song, it feels to me like you're making important statements about human liberation. I mean, including
Mm-hmm.
everything, including all the things you've said so far, in
Yeah.
our conversation here. There are some exceptions, like Jerusalem, which is, I think, overtly political, although very personal.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, your work feels like the perfect example of I believe that the personal is always political. Am
Yeah.
I reading this right? In your role as a
Yeah,
songwriter,
for
do you
sure.
think of yourself as an activist? How does this sit?
The truth is, when I was younger, I identified as an activist more. I partly because I from a pretty young age, I was active in like actually active in movements like from about the age of 12. I had this uh some like opening this the world sort of opened up to me in a way when I was around 9. It was like 1984, and it was also I don't know if you remember, there was like this TV show that was called The Day After Tomorrow, and I think that's what it was called, and it was about nuclear war, nuclear catastrophe,
Hmm.
and what would happen after. And I'm not even sure if I saw it, but it was 1984. It was like prime like Cold War, building up these nuclear arsenals. And it's not like I was reading the newspapers, but I just picked up on that
Hmm.
and picked up on how horrifying it was, and I wanted to stop it. I wanted to help stop it. And um and so that sort of awareness of like these larger conflicts and disagreements and stupid adults making crazy choices that were just going to destroy everything. You have
Yeah.
to stop doing that,
Yeah.
because um so that like started when I was 9, and then when I was 12, my cousin, my I have my one of my mom's sisters was pretty active in anti-nuclear stuff, and um, one of her daughters, who my cousin Crystal, who's just we're basically the same age. I think she's 6 months younger or something. She decided to join the Great Peace March for Global Nuclear Disarmament, which was like a cross country peace walk. She was 10 actually, and so she joined that, and I found out that my cousin was doing this peace march, anti-nuclear peace march. So I joined that too. I like left 7th grade for 6 weeks and walked from Harrisburg to DC with, like a whole bunch of peace activists, anti-nuclear activists, mostly adults. Um and and so that started a bunch of years from the ages of about 12 to 16. I did a number of um like long, like weeks or month long peace marches, mostly like anti-nuclear. One of them was an environmental walk. and like it was the 80s. I sometimes I think now, like, what happened to peace marches?
Uh-huh.
Like, why is everything on the internet, like only online now? All
Yeah,
activism is like sitting in front of your computer somehow. When I I mean, who know, it's not like nothing can happen from. I think there's
sure.
value in all of the different kinds of communication and activism, but it was pretty cool, like
Totally.
walking through towns and meeting with people, and like it was, we were like face to face talking to people about this issue, um, which is different than sending emails and sitting in front of a computer.
Yeah.
But anyway, as a youth, I did identify as an activist, and I like there were a number of issues that I was sort of got involved with groups, like um like the Philadelphia area committee for like in solidarity with the people of El Salvador. That was like what I did when I was in high school. And so um so I have retained the soul of an activist. But I did find that like once I once I started college, which is funny because most people like
Right.
are a little bit spaced out about the
Uh-huh.
world and what all the stuff that's happening, that they could be active in either helping along or stopping. Usually that opening happens for people when they get to college.
Right.
And I had a pretty active, like earlier youth. And then when I got to college, I still like retained all of those ideals and connections, but I wasn't as like active as an activist. But that's when I started writing songs. And so
Right.
I think it was natural for me to include those passions and those ideals in my music, or it was natural that they would come out through my music.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I had a similarly backwards activist early
Mm,
life experience, where at 14, it was the fall of Nicolae Ceausescu in Romania and the collapse
right.
of the Soviet bloc, and orphanages were kind of popping up all over the country for reasons I won't go into, and I ended up going with my mother for the summer of my freshman year of high school to work in an orphanage. I was the youngest person by, I don't know, 8 years or something like that.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
which really changed my life.
To Romania.
To Romania, yeah,
Oh,
for,
wow.
with an aid organization. I went there with them to do that, which really sort of fit where I was at 14 as a young activist, and then
Totally.
and then it's sort of I think maybe for some slightly different reasons, but I also have led a little bit less of a life of an activist in that sense, and the activism kind of just became who I am in all
Right.
the things that I do. So
Yeah.
that's so interesting
That's
to hear.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so let's see. Your sound has changed a lot over time, I think. Your debut, you think it's like this, but really it's like this, is both incredibly unique and to me also steeped in the sound of late 90s Olympia lo-fi. Your next album, Advisory Committee, still has that lo-fi sound, but is, I think, kind of fuller in terms of instrumentation. And with
Hmm.
each new album, you bring in new sounds and styles. I continue to hear elements of those lo-fi origins, but
Yeah.
your sound, seems to evolve and grow as you do.
Hmm.
And the latter albums have what I would describe as, I think, more complex production values. um,
Hmm.
I love the way you've insisted on making music the way you want to make it and have not accepted, tethers or limitations based on fan expectations or trends or your previous work. I'm curious to know how this works during the writing process. Do you approach
Hmm.
a new song as a collection of lyrics and then fit it into the style of music you're currently making? Or do you have to consider the style of the song and the sound and instrumentation as you put together the written form?
Yeah. Um, well, I'm going to address that quickly, and then I have just a funny thought about my first record
Great.
that I'll add in. But I do I do find that I the recording I do the recording process in service to the song. And so the song will emerge, and and as I said, it's like just a guitar and vocal, sometimes just a vocal. Um, Occasionally, have I ever done, maybe occasionally I've used like a keyboard instrument, and but like the and like I consider a song, like I can feel when it's complete long before I record it. The recording is like this whole other chapter for the life of this song.
Huh.
It emerges. It's like it's a it's a complete entity, um, and and um, sometimes I'll record. I'll write, and this is what I did for those first several albums. I would have a song, and it was also because of what was available to me at that time, living in Olympia, being close friends with Phil Elverum, having a key to Dub Narcotic, the big room, the
I heard about
recording
this.
studio at K
Amazing.
Records.
Yeah.
Like literally, we just had keys and we'd just go, and like, and there would be nobody there, and then we'd just go in and record the song. Um, but even past that, like I could feel that a song entity. I'm holding it. It's like a little baby.
Right.
My arms
This is a podcast, so I'll just describe it. Mirah is cradling her
I'm-
song in her arms.
Yeah. But I could sort of like, that baby could be happy and tended and wait on the recording process till I have like a bunch of babies, and then I could go record them. That's one thing that changed from the earlier albums to now is now I'll make the babies, and then I'll sort of focus on recording as like a cohesive period of time. But yeah, it's in service to the song, and they really are. I've marveled sometimes listening to some people's records. I don't know about an example, but like a lot of records, they're sort of like there's like, I mean, I do think that mine have a sound, like you can tell it's me. It's my voice, obviously, but like I've had the same main guitar the whole time, so that has a certain sound. I have certain like, you know, choices, like maybe my choices tend to be the same. You can hear that it's me, but they all sound different from each other. They're like it's not like this seamless flow where it all sounds like one song. It doesn't all sound like one song. Each song is pretty individual. Um, and I notice sometimes listening to other records that I'm like, this kind of all, and not in a bad way, like in a totally pleasurable way. It sounds like one long song, but mine are like, those babies have really different personalities, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So the recording process is the way to like investigate and honor the personality of each song. And one funny thing about my first record is I spent a bunch of years not listening to it, and sort of like, I mean, I liked that I made it. I liked it. It was good. But then I was moving on, and I wanted to not always be associated with like exactly that age or that time or those songs. And so I was just like, okay, moving on. So there were a bunch of years where I didn't listen to it. And then maybe like around the time It's like around 2009 or Aspera time or after that. No, I think it was around the time when I started recording Changing Light, which was much later. That was like, I think I started recording that in 2014, maybe. And no, it came out in 2012, 2013, something like that. I don't know. But I was listening to my first record and I was like, oh my God, this is hysterical. I totally made this quintessential lo-fi indie Olympia bedroom pop record that it sounds exactly like that. Those words, that description that I just said. But that's not what I was trying to make. That's just what happened naturally. I wasn't like, what does lo-fi bedroom indie pop sound like? That's the sound I'm going for.
Right,
I wasn't
right.
going for a sound. I just
Sure.
made this thing. And it was so funny because like I sometimes hear things that are recorded much later that
Hmm.
are at least referencing
Sure.
that era or like something that is in that record, but it was just it just came out that way.
That's what I was just thinking is I think partly you weren't referencing that you weren't trying to make that sound, partly because you were one of the people who created that sound.
I guess so.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, now when I listen to it, I had this cool experience a couple months ago. Where was I? I was driving back from visiting my mom at the farm, and um, I didn't have my kid with me, and I just had like, 2.5 hours in the car, and I I don't know why I decided to do this. I wanted something to listen to. I've done that drive a lot. And I was like, oh, I think on the way there, I had been like, I don't know what to listen to. I'm totally just going to like use the Spotify function where you say, um, I was like, Sinead O'Connor radio,
Hmm. Hmm.
And I was like, because I don't want to look through stuff and pick things. And that's why they have that function.
Totally.
Push the button. Okay. So that's what I did on the way to the farm. I've always loved Sinead O'Connor. Um, and and then on the way back, I was like, you know what? I'm going to listen to Mirah radio on Spotify. I wonder what they do.
Oh,
I
that's
wonder
great.
what the algorithm goes from, how they're going to choose one song, the next song,
Yeah.
if anything's going to surprise me, if I'll be like, I totally forgot about that song and it'll play. And I know this sounds weird to talk about. Like, I don't know if other musicians do this sometimes, but it was actually a really good experience for me because right now I'm not writing very much and I'm, like just spending the vast majority of my time just kind of like parenting, being with my kid. My kid's 4.5, and
Yeah.
it, I want to be writing more. It's just not happening right now. I've had to make my peace with that and um just sort of like rest in a knowledge that I'm going to come back to that when the time and space opens up in the right way. But I have sad feelings about it because there's like a whole part of me that's been missing. I
Sure.
miss it.
Sure.
Um like I was describing with that golden thread at, my shows that I've been doing every 3 or 4 months, and like I miss it.
Hmm.
And I miss the songwriting. I miss recording. It's like just I can't figure out how to get it in my days right now. But listening to like the Spotify playlists, they were like, "This is Mirah." And I'm like, oh yeah, that is me. All that's all me.
Yeah.
I did. I wrote all of those songs. I made all of those choices. Oh, that choice Phil made. Oh, I remember. And it was like a trip down memory lane because since I was sort of like passive about the choices of which songs would come on
Right.
next, then I could be like the work that my brain was doing was just like going into the memories of writing the song or the memories of recording the song or memories of performing the song. And it was awesome.
That's so cool. I love these funny ways where the algorithms and the impersonalness of online life end up providing something that's actually really
Yeah.
kind of lovely. It keeps happening in spite of itself.
Yeah.
I had talked about that I find your work to be very personal. Seems to me that in your early work, you wrote a lot about what you might call matters of the heart, including love, intimacy, heartbreak, loss. I'm always so aware that if you write a great song, you then have to perform it in front of family and friends and strangers over and over. And I'm
Mhm.
curious what your experience is in terms of, sharing what's in your heart in this way with
Mhm.
your audience. I'm sure it's a huge part of why people connect with your music the way they do. We're all so hungry to
Mhm.
have somebody articulate our beautiful and complicated human experience in an inspiring way. But
Mhm.
I'm curious what it's been like, for you as the artist, writer, performer.
Um yeah, I mean I've definitely had some pretty uh like intense emotional experiences. I mean, I can think of a few examples. Well, the song that we'll be listening to later that I chose for our, two songs that we're talking about. Um that song is called Energy, and can I talk about it now?
Yeah,
Or
you can
should I
spoiler it.
save
Go
it?
ahead. No, you're good. You're good.
Sorry. um well, I wrote I'm going to talk about it now. Can
No,
I
go
just
for
do
it. Go
it?
for it. Absolutely.
Okay. So I wrote that song um, at a time when my dad was going through cancer treatments, and also a good friend of mine, Genevieve Castray, who's married to Phil Elverum, my dear friend who I had done all this recording with over the years. She was going through cancer treatments and they had just had a baby, and I was there was just a lot about um like sickness, death, like, and also new life, and just like contending with loss or the possibility of loss, and gratitude for all the beautiful things in life. But there's this like great, just enormous amount of sorrow around um, like that feeling where can't you can't stop death from happening. Death is it's the one absolute, you know, like, and so that's those were the things that were swirling in me when I
Hmm.
wrote the song, and then skip ahead to I recorded the song. It ended up coming out on my album Understanding, which came out in 2018. And it just so happened I wrote the song in 2017. Um, but it just so happened that uh, that album came out in September of 2018, and I was around 6 months pregnant when the album came out. And also, my dad had just died. My dad died on August 24th, 2018. And the album was coming out 2 weeks later. And you know how these, like, the dates are chosen months in advance, and I had chosen, the album was ready. I could have released it in the spring, but I I preferred to sort of start the touring cycle in the fall. There were all these reasons why. We were also, doing this music festival thing that summer. So I was like, no, I'm going to wait till the fall, not knowing,
Yeah.
6 months before when I chose the release date, that my dad was going to die 2 weeks before. And I did do that tour.
Wow.
And, I wasn't sure. I mean, I definitely considered not doing the tour. I was like deeply grieving, 6 months pregnant. It would have definitely been understandable by anyone if I decided to not do the tour.
Yeah.
But also, my dad was like absolutely my biggest fan. There's no one I never expect ever in my life that there would ever be that I will ever have a bigger fan than my dad. And that's how parents are with their kids, like
Oh yeah.
we're their biggest fans. And the thing that I did as a job was a thing that like I had fans for. My dad was the biggest one. And my dad also was like the person who really brought so much music into my life. And I have a brother and a sister. And I mean, we still have his record collection. Like, he just loved music from the time he was a little kid. And he always went to see live music. I mean, if I had a list of all the performers that he saw, live in his life, I wish I did have that list. He just like, he grew up like 50s, 60s. My parents worked at the Electric Factory in Philadelphia in, I think, like 1968. And just all the music. He took us to shows at clubs, stadiums, anywhere. We would just, like, I was surrounded by music. And, we didn't, like, play instruments. We weren't, like, a family band that played instruments, but we just loved music. And we sang together. We learned the songs. My dad was a great, great singer. He had an amazing voice. And so anyway, when I was, like, just trying to figure, like, just, it was such a hard time. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? Like, should I do this tour? And I did decide to do it. And I can't imagine not having done the tour, because exactly that thing that I was describing to you about what I receive through performing, I think I really needed that, because it helps me to connect with myself. And that song, Energy, I ended every set with that song. And it was extremely emotional. And I don't know how many or few people in the audiences knew that my dad had just died. I don't tend to post a ton of like super personal stuff, but I did, that's a big one. I posted that my dad had died. Sure. And so I don't know if the sort of energy exchange that I was experiencing was a sort of like compassionate one of people who knew what I personally was going through, or if they were just listening and feeling their own whatever they were getting from the lyrics, just their gratitude for their own life or the people that they love, or the sorrow of losing people you love. but the whole package deal, whatever they were responding to and relating to themselves or to me, and what I was responding to um, through the process of performing that song, it was very healing, really, to do that every night.
Yeah.
You know.
It's amazing. Yeah, thank you for sharing that incredible story.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we were going to listen to Energy second, but since you've led into it so beautifully, let's listen to Energy first.
Okay.
This first song is Energy by my guest Mirah Yantav-Zaitlin.
We only know that it's not that easy when time together is gone. It's not for us to say how long, to say how good, to say how strong. We are turning in the night to our lovers' love light, for some holding on, for some good songs, and to reconcile all we will lose, 'cause we can't choose, no, we can't choose how the day falls, how the stars lift. We can't just give tenderness. Let's try to get all together, but even if we check the weather, we might never be prepared for what comes. But I'll take care of what I can. I'll give thanks to my parents for giving me this body for my soul to breathe. It's in here that I keep making memories. I will hold on. I will hold on to these for when time together is done. And I feel so much love for the people who've come with me, even when I've been kicking and crying. When I'm mad and I'm burdened and I'm feeling uncertain, and I just want to lay down my mind
That was my guest, Mirah Zaitlin, with her song Energy. That is a beautiful song, and
Thanks.
was very powerful having heard about how you wrote it and how you performed it and the kind of some of the place it's taken in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's see. I had some questions to ask about energy, but I think you've already answered some of them about. Well,
Okay.
actually, I am curious. This is the question I was going to ask. You've sort of spoken to this, but I'm curious why you chose this song for today.
Um, I chose this one because it's one of the times when I have just written it in 5 minutes, written a song in 5 minutes. I was talking before about, identifying with language and words and that form of expression. And I will often, even if, parts of a song come out fast, then I tinker a lot with the words and move things around. So most of the time, there's like a process of at least a few days and sometimes weeks. And it never took me 10 years. Like I think, Leonard Cohen, he would talk about writing the song Hallelujah and how it took him 10 years,
Right.
which I loved. I always loved knowing that and hearing him talk about that and having that be okay and
Mm-hmm.
an awesome process because an incredible song and it just took that long. That's what the song asked Leonard to do, and he did it, Um, but sometimes my songs will take, like a while till they sort of settle in and all the words settle together and I get it in the right order.
Mm-hmm.
But just a few rare times, it's been like a
Mm-hmm.
real, it just like kind of swoops in and it
Right.
lands in me and on the page um and that feels special because it doesn't happen that way all the time. It feels like it it arrived fully formed, you know. And in fact, the recording on the record, the whole first section where I'm, just playing guitar and singing and it's one of the only times that it's not my Gibson on a recording. I have maybe like 7 years ago, I finally got another guitar.
Ah.
it's I think like 1959 Martin electric acoustic. It's like um, the first Martin that they made, like with, like you could plug it in.
Wow.
Um, but I'm just playing that acoustically, and that is the original voice memo recording that I recorded moments after I wrote the song.
That's on your phone,
And
that beginning part.
yeah, that was on my phone.
That's amazing.
And I tried, and you hear people talk about this sometimes, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, that's why people end up with the demo. The demo take is the take
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the time.
Yep.
And this ended up being like not even like a demo take, but
Right.
just like this was I think this came out fully formed. I better record this right now on my phone, And I tried re-recording it, in the studio when I was working on the record. And none of the recordings had that authenticity, and they didn't capture the fragility really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you can hear my head turning because I'm sort of like looking over at my notebook
Uh-huh.
and my fingers, and I'm just like sitting in a chair in my living room with these scribbles on a piece of paper that I could like barely read.
Yeah.
And Um, I can't remember your question.
Oh, just why this is a
Oh,
song
why
you
I
wanted to
chose
talk
that
about
song.
today.
Yeah, so that's why I chose the song, because it it came in fully formed and really like quickly, and I kind of feel like it's maybe the best song I've ever written. Like, you know, if if that I feel like if for some reason I never write another song, you know what? I wrote that song, and that kind of says it all. And it's just like this pure, beautiful, love-filled, gratitude-filled, like broken with sorrow, wake up in the morning
Mm,
anyway
mm.
kind of expression.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I feel thankful really that I got to get that song come through me, you know?
yeah. Oh, that's so gorgeous. Um, I'm curious when you wrote it if you understood then what energy meant to you, what the dimensions of it, and I'm curious what you think about it now.
Well, no, I didn't. That's the answer is I you know, my dad had been sick, but at that time, I mean, he actually like he had a whole remission. He was like
Mm,
then he was fine for years. So
mm,
like in terms of that loss, the loss of my dad, um the searing sorrow of losing my dad, of course, anytime someone you love is sick, and like has an illness like that, has cancer, you consider um the you know the ultimate loss of them that will happen at some point. If you haven't really contended with it before, you will, even if they do go on to live for years.
sure.
But so at the time that I wrote the song, I I knew it was good and true, and had held so much meaning for me. Um, but I don't think I knew how much I would need the song
Mm, mm.
um, later, and just sort of continuing. Um, yeah.
Can I ask more specifically about that? Again,
Yeah.
very beautiful what you're saying. I cried during the song, and I'm every time you say something new, I well up a little bit. Um, I'm so it's like I think the way I heard energy in the song, some of it seems like you can take it literally in a way. You say a new day begins with more energy. That's the very last line, and you have similar
Hmm.
lines earlier on. So I mean, that's interesting. A new day begins. Let me read it again. A new day begins with more energy. It's
Hmm.
like it reminds me of my 10-year-old. Sometimes I try to start his day with like a little infusion of hope or joy, and I'll just
Hmm.
try and sort of find that tone in my voice and say it's a new day.
Yeah.
Anything could happen today,
Yeah.
and that's what that reminds me of that sentiment in a way,
Hmm.
but also energy. Since so clearly this song is about the life cycle. I didn't know that your dad had cancer, and I didn't know that he had died. Of course, he hadn't died when you wrote this song. Um, but my mind also very much went to sort of us being energy in the universe,
Oh,
and
totally.
so I
Yeah.
so I assumed those two things were there when you wrote it, and I'm wondering, do you have anything else to say about it? Did you think about it differently than that?
I mean, well, I think like that sense of it was also something that I wasn't um didn't completely have that interpretation at the time
Mm,
that I wrote it.
I wondered. Okay.
Um it like and like with anything that we make, it sort of continues to evolve with meaning and sort of sprout new
Yep.
branches as our, like in this example, it was, I knew it was meaningful and important, but I didn't know how much I would need the song later, after losing my dad. And the reference to energy, I mean, there's so many layers there. There is the layer about this sort of like constant turning over, whether that means you know waking up in the same body in a new day to sort of see what will happen today. Yesterday maybe was pretty hard. It's a new day. So there's like that. There's also not waking up in the same body. Maybe
Oh, wow.
there's like this sort of, you're through that cycle.
Right.
You're into your next form of energy.
Mm.
There's also like the sort of weightiness of aging and having a feeling of like the difficulties of life stacking up, and even throughout a single day, it can just feel like I feel that pressure. And then you can wake up the next day and maybe some of that pressure will come back, but maybe it won't all rest in the same way, or maybe some of it will have moved on,
Yeah.
So there's like the just like a sort of like a mental health perspective on not having energy and like not like having a weighted down feeling, but then knowing that it's not like you get a sort of tide coming in and going out like every night and every day.
Yeah. I have to add on a more literal, sort of a lyrical note that I really like the rhyme burdened and uncertain. I think that's an unusual two words to rhyme, but they sort of play off each other in this interesting way, both in terms of the rhyme and in terms of the meaning.
And I mean, that's exactly like, that's the type of thing that in other songs I may have like tinkered with that.
Right,
Those
right.
two words might have like shown up, and then I sort of move them around and then I'd be like, oh look, they can play off each other if I put them, in this relationship
Right.
with each other. But for this song, it was just like,
It just came through you. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool. I'm always curious about the way people order their songs on their albums, and this is the last song on your newest album.
Yeah.
What made you want to put it last?
Well, exactly what I was talking about before. Like, it's actually a hard act to follow.
Sure.
I often end shows with it since I wrote it. It's like my 4.5-year-old talking. Since I wrote it, it's often been last on the set list for a show, and even I have noticed that if it's a performance situation where there's not an opportunity for an encore, or I'm tired, or and sometimes there's like a curfew, whatever, with a show, I find that like it satisfies the people. I can play that song and people understand that there's like a all that needs to be said has been said now.
Wow. Yeah.
After that song. And it's been interesting to sense that from audiences, and sort of like, or share that sensibility with an audience, in a situation where normally it would be like cheering for yet another song because that one was so good, but there's like
Oh,
a
interesting.
real understanding of that that's what you needed to say and hear, that's what I needed to say and hear,
Mm,
and all that needed to be said has been said, and now you know we can like feel complete.
it's almost
So
like,
I mean, I knew immediately that that would be the last song on the album.
sure. It's almost like dropping the mic if the mic was your beating heart.
Basically, yeah.
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 Any last thing you want to say about Energy before we move on to our next song?
Um, well, like I hadn't listened to the full recording like in a focused way like that in a long time, and um it was great listening to it. Um just thinking about the recording process. So I mentioned that the whole first half of the song it's literally a voice memo on my phone from, a few minutes after I wrote the song. Um, but I knew that there was sort of uh like a larger expression of it that I I wanted to include, and and I had played it with some of my bandmates, so I knew that okay, it's like it gets big, there's distortion, there's drums, and then I just kept calling people in, or like a friend would be visiting and be like, okay, great, now let's do accordion and piano since that's what you play. um, but the very first layer of that second section, besides the guitar, um, was Phil Elverum,
Mm.
who had come through Brooklyn. He must have had a show. I guess he had a show, and he came, and I asked him if he would play drums on this recording, and he had not played drums in a long time, and he hadn't played drums since before Genevieve had died, and I mean, he did an incredible job of continuing to write, like all through his process of grieving.
Mm.
Um, but he hadn't been playing drums. That's what he shared with me, and he was unusually hesitant to. I think there was a part of him that like didn't want to play, or
Mhm.
that it was something about it. He might correct me on that. I don't know.
Uh-huh.
Um, or he's not a very doubtful person. He doesn't doubt that much,
Uh-huh.
I feel like. Um, but there was some like doubt. And I was like, well, you know what? Let's just do it. We have this some recording studio in our garage, and the drums were all set up, and my partner Todd, he had the mics all set up, um, and then we got in here, and I was like, okay, let's just do it. And I, of course, I for some reason I was like so like taken up in the moment of like, okay, Phil's here, he's gonna do it. I didn't check any levels. like and like Todd had just like set up the mics. He didn't like check levels or do we didn't do that. Worked out. It was fine. Um it literally ended up being the first take that Phil did.
Yeah.
And it just there's just so much in it. There's so much. Um yeah, so it felt like a really it's just like very true to the song to capture that moment with
Right.
Phil, and also Phil and I have like this whole history of recording music together, and he was basically my initial inspiration to become not just a songwriter and performer, but a recording artist and producer.
Mhm.
He was extremely influential on me, and we did that work together so for so many years. So yeah, that I feel it feels special to me that moment is captured on that recording, just like that the whole first part is like I just wrote the song. So there's definitely this um authenticity of like experience in the moment, and like the um capturing the emotional moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You both, it was both of your first takes as a theme of the song. It's both of your first
Yeah.
takes, and you were both uh, experiencing similar and overlapping big heartbreaks
Mhm.
in your lives with your partners, with his partner
Mhm.
and your father, and yeah,
Mhm.
and your close relationship to his wife.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Well, should we move on to the next song?
Sure. Yeah, I'm so curious what you picked.
Okay, I for my choice, I have chosen Mount St. Helens.
Ooh, fun.
All right, we'll be back in a minute. Here's Mount St. Helens.
From the morning when I rise from my bed till the evening when I lay my head in slumber, oh, the loss of you does wreck my days, leaves me with a violent hunger. I will never be free from you till I escape the lion's jaw. There's no welcome in the end. There's no reason to return again. The mountain stood so large, we were humbled. We walked a high and lonely path. The sun beat down on the ground. We looked around us. There were no trees there. We found a creek there. We dipped our feet there. We were alone there. There was still hope there. There had been a great disaster. The hot winds came just after. A tremendous shock was felt. Survivors often tell. The trees all hit the ground. Death was all around, and not a single lonesome sigh. The example lay before you. You knew what you had to do. You had the pressure in you to destroy the one who loved you. The death was all around. You were hotter to me than the sun that burned me up the day we went to Mount St. Helens. And if the special death you gave to me is the prize I get to take home solemnly, then
Once again, that was Mount St. Helens by my guest, Mirah Zaitlin. Okay, before I jump into it, I have to ask, you mentioned that your long-standing guitar is a Gibson. I'm wondering if you're playing the Gibson on this song in the beginning. We can hear it so clearly.
That's a great question. And the truth is, I can't completely remember. So that was my only guitar at the time. Phil also, he generally had like at least one of these, maybe like a Silvertone,
Oh, yeah.
like parlor size acoustic guitar. It is possible that I was playing one of his, and I cannot definitively answer your question.
Okay, good to know.
Phil might remember. We could ask, and I can't even. I could listen to it again and then see if I can tell. I wasn't listening for that specifically, but
That's all right. I'm a
maybe
little.
that'll be a fun game for the podcast audience to see if they can tell.
Can you tell from the
Tell us.
tone of the acoustic? So I'm a little bit obsessed with Gibson guitars, and I'm curious what your Gibson is.
It is a ES 120, and it is 1969.
Oh, sweet.
69 ES 120, so hollow body, and with the sunburst iced tea finish. And what else about it? I'm like not a gear person at all. I know what equipment I have. I know it's good.
Yeah, yeah.
But I just never, like I said, I got my second guitar like 20 years into my professional
Totally.
career as a guitar playing singer-songwriter.
Totally.
And I still only have like one pedal, basically. I have a Big Muff. It's like one of the original ones. Like it's like a big. They make them now. They're small. They actually don't sound as good.
I'm sure.
Mine sounds awesome.
I bet.
Always has, and that's my only pedal.
That's so great. I now realize that in the videos I've seen your Gibson archtop. So that's good to know. You can see my 65 J45 behind me, which I'm entirely obsessed with. So I was not really familiar with Energy before listening to it for our podcast. I love it so much, and I'm really glad to have that song in my life now. Mount St. Helens I've been listening to for 20-something years, and I love it so much. It gives me the feels in a major way every time. I probably heard it 100 times. And looking at the lyrics on paper, I was struck by several things I had never noticed. So I teach songwriting at my local library, and I do private songwriting lessons and tutoring. And I always start with the anatomy of a song, for people who are very new songwriters. We talk about, verse and chorus and bridge, and people often want to know, is there a verse, chorus, bridge formula for a good song? And I explain that, many songs follow a general formula, but there are no rules. And I also say that, songwriting is like most art. I think it helps to know the rules before you break them, but breaking the rules is exciting and often, really worthwhile. So I find what you've done here very exciting. The song has an unconventional structure, and I think it's hard to write a really compelling, engaging, fun to listen to song with a really experimental song structure, and you've done just that. There are 3 clearly different parts of the song. The opening verse that's lilting and slow with that guitar, which we are not quite sure what it is. Then the 3 middle verses I would describe as B-verse. I call it B-verse when you have not shifted from verse to chorus or verse to bridge, but you've changed the verse so dramatically that it's no longer the same thing you were doing in the A-verse.
Yep.
So then after...
I agree. That's also how... Yes.
Okay, good. That's what you would have called it?
Yeah.
Good. So after that opening verse, the mood becomes harder, and the guitar rhythm totally changes to a fast strum. The third part is the end, and to me it feels like the chorus, even though it's unconventional. And it's the part that goes, "You were hotter to me than the sun, that burned me up the day we went to Mount St. Helens.
Mhm.
It's the title of the song. It feels to me like the thesis of the song, and melodically, the end of the song has an emotional swell that I associate with the chorus.
Mhm.
And I want to point out one more thing about this song before I turn this over to you, and that's the rhyme scheme in the first B verse. And I'll read it here. So,
You mean how I rhyme there with there with there with there?
well, it's interesting. That is half of what I'm getting at. So, but if you look at the first half of that, it's the mountain stood so large, we were humbled. We walked a high and lonely path. The sun beat down on the ground. We looked around us, and then we get to there were no trees there. We found a creek there. We dipped our feet there. We were alone there. There was still hope there. So again, I think it's really hard to write a incredible, interesting song without rhyming and with irregular verse lines. And that's what you've done here. The first half of this doesn't rhyme at all. And the second half, you're rhyming the same word over and over, which shouldn't be as interesting, I feel like, as it
I love
really
that
is.
I got away with that. It's so cool.
So exactly. Oh, what a
Yeah.
thrill. So I'm interested in
Yeah.
anything you have to say about this, but I'll start by asking how much of this song came through you as instinct, as you laid out in the beginning of, I think the way you talked about your songwriting reminds me of how I feel about this song. It feels like you
Yeah.
just channeled what you were living at the time and put it on paper, and it was so raw and real that it worked perfectly. Versus, did you wrestle with it, edit, rework Mount St. Helens?
This was like complete instinct, and also, I mean, like at that time, I mean, my first two albums came out, I think, like basically within a year of each other. So it was a relatively prolific writing time for me. Um, and yeah, this song totally like instinct driven. And it's funny to me that, I'm like I was talking about all the music that I listened to growing up, and so many different kinds of music that my dad exposed all of us to in the family, and much of it with pretty standard song structure.
Yep.
And I, like I said, I listened to the lyrics and the lead singer. That's what I identified with. I mean, like, speaking of Carole King, like, she's a master of, like, even doing, like, having the bridge and like having the arc of the song.
Yeah.
Really effectively using a standard songwriting, um, you know, uh, structure. And so it's funny to me that although I was steeped in that as, a listener,
Right.
and it made a lot of intrinsic sense to me, many of my songs, just right from the beginning, did not, I mean, I'm sure that like at least half, if not three quarters, if not 4/5 of my songs do not have a chorus.
Right.
And it ends up being a like sort of long-standing joke when I'm rehearsing, especially with like a new bandmate.
I can
Like,
imagine.
okay, so the structure of the song, it goes like A, then B, then C, and then like there's like D, and then there's like this little ending that's E. And it's like, and also that like somehow what made sense to me as a songwriter was like, I'm just gonna say everything I need to say it once, and then the song is over. And like I do have songs with choruses, but I actually really like just saying everything I have to say once, and then it's the end. I don't need to repeat things a bunch of times, and so yeah, totally instinct driven and like hysterically sort of like outside of the standard songwriting structure, even though I have been steeped in that my whole life.
Yeah.
And some, I have written songs with choruses, and I have written songs with a more standard structure. But I totally agree with you that it's useful to know and understand that. And one of the reasons why is sometimes if I'm just working with instinct, but I'm like, there's something missing, I don't know what it is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to stay stuck forever. I can be like, well, I need, even if it's just, I've done this sometimes where in the initial writing of the song, I just sort of like I'm just saying everything once and then it's the end. But then when I get to recording it, I'm like, okay, well, there needs to be another section. It's going to be a musical section. So it's going to go like this because the song needs a little bit more shape.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah.
I find it remarkable about the way you approach writing songs and about the way songs like this have turned out. Um, to me, what part of what's remarkable is that for so many of us who are songwriters, I think we want to turn off our analytical brain, our structure brain, turn off the
Hmm.
part of our mind that says, okay, I think I'd like to write a song that's sort of about this, or I'd like to write a song that sort of makes me feel such a way. I think a lot of us want to turn off the part of our minds that have us start with any kind of calculation and just sort of let the feeling of it flow through us, both
Yeah.
in terms of the lyrics, in terms of the feel, in terms of the structure. And I think for most of us, that's quite hard because what you end up with oftentimes is kind of it feels inaccessible. I think is
Uh-huh.
is my feeling about that challenge for myself, and I think for a lot of artists it works that way. Somehow you seem to be able to do that in a way that it's very accessible, which is really
Uh-huh.
interesting to me.
I mean, one of the things I was thinking about listening to it, and I come to this thought a lot listening to, especially like my very earliest recordings, and noticing in the recordings where I'm like, oh, oh, I totally like off key on that line, or wow, we like forgot to tune the guitar, or we didn't think it was important. Um, and somehow like as a package deal with the songwriting, my voice at the time, and like it all ends up working, and it's one of the things that contributes to this sort of like lo-fi indie bedroom pop Olympia Washington early 90s whole thing.
Sure.
But in terms of the songwriting, there's a similarity with that sort of like it's like an equal amount of caring and not caring. And
Mm,
I don't mean not caring like in an inconsiderate kind of not caring, but like um more like a just not I don't have the patience to analyze what I'm doing. I don't I'm not interested, like I don't even have like I don't care. I don't care about I don't care about the rules
hmm
so much that they're not even bothering. The rules aren't coming in and like, scratching at my head and saying, "Hey, let me in. I'm a songwriting rule."
mm,
I so don't care about them
mm.
that they're not even there scratching at my head. So, and I feel fortunate that I'm not a I mean, I'm a Virgo. I like I have like every all these parts of me that are so exacting and really want things to be a very particular way, and um like and parts of me that really appreciate and thrive in structure and structured situations. Yet I have lived a lot of the vast majority of my life, um outside of like extremely structured situations. I went to the Evergreen State College.
Yeah, right.
It's like I had hippie parents to begin with who were so incredibly supportive of everything I did and never forced me to, like, I quit every lesson, every instrument lesson that I started. I was like, okay, I'm done now. No one made me stay. I
Sure.
dropped out of Hebrew school. No one made me stay.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that's all, like, I do wish I'd continued playing violin and like retained, and continued with being able to like read music and
Sure.
Western music notation and all that stuff. But in terms of structure, like I think in my life I have been able to satisfy my craving for structure, by having it exist in these certain realms, but I was able to resist the not helpful aspects of structure in this very important, what turned out to be a very important area of my life, which
Yeah.
is songwriting, recording, and just like making music and having that retain the authenticity of a sort of direct line from me out, and just shrugging off the that little structure voice or rule voice. you know
Terrific. Before we move on to our final segment, any advice for new songwriters?
Well, I guess, continuing on that theme, um I think my main advice is um just anything you can do to feel true and listening to your own voice and emotional body, and yeah, because what's unique about, like I was saying in the beginning, our when I was talking about it, I was talking about our physical voice, like no one ever
Right.
before or ever in the future, your own, each human being's physical voice that comes out of their body, if they're a person with a voice, um, is completely unique in the history of everything,
Hmm.
and that should be honored,
Yeah.
by sort of continuing that, or like, the roots of that are that actually that's true about everything about you.
Hmm.
There's only one current you. I personally, I do believe in reincarnation,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not you in another life. That's actually, that's like energy that comes out again
Hmm.
into a new beautiful expression.
Yeah.
So this got a little esoteric,
No,
but
it's great.
really just like, honor yourself and take a walk.
Wonderful. To finish out the show, we'll each share one cool thing, something that's piqued your interest, or even something you've been mildly obsessed with that you think our listeners might enjoy. Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
I can go first. I feel like mine is a little bit silly, but it's like it was a recent discovery. Even as a person who, I did live in the Bay Area for a few years before I moved to New York, and this was a new thing, that I was recently there with my kid, and my cousins were like, "Oh, well, have you ever ridden the steam trains in Tilden Park up in the sort of Berkeley, Oakland hills?" I was like, "No." And so I went with my kid and we had the best time. There is a miniature steam train that is beautiful and it's like so well taken care of.
Huh.
And it pulls these cars that you can sit in and the cool thing was, I was there with my 4-year-old. There were like adults there without kids. It's just a fun, cool thing. There's a mini train track, and we just went like chugga 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 on this train track through like redwood groves with this beautiful view, and so it's maybe a little bit of a silly thing as my one cool thing, but like I also with those things think about. There was something about going on that steam train that reminded me of going on carousels, because it was like a thing you do with your kid, and it costs a couple dollars a pop, and you do it 3 times in a row, and I had this realization recently about carousels because we were on the carousel at Prospect Park here in Brooklyn, and I was like, my kid likes for me to stand next to him and like hold him.
Sure.
And they do have these little seat belts that are totally crappy seat belts. They were definitely like a later addition. They're not like beautiful old seat belts that are like look like the beautiful old carousel. It's like this crappy little like clippy camping thing, and I was like, why did they make this so tall? Because like the little kids can't even get on by themselves. Even like the stirrups are really high. Right. And then I was like, oh, because this was made for adults. And this is what was fun for adults in, whenever they started making carousels, like 1885.
That's amazing.
Or 1915.
Never occurred to me.
A carousel was not made for children. It was made for adults who were like on a date or having fun with their friends, adults going out and going on a carousel for fun. And then I'm like, wow, the world has really changed, hasn't it? And the truth is, like, carousels are fun. And riding on that steam train, it was super fun.
Sounds so fun. If I'm ever out west, I'm totally going to check that out. Thank you. I don't think that's silly at all. Let's see. So my one cool thing this week is a video game. I had about a 20-year hiatus from video games. I stopped playing when I was 16 and decided if I was going to make things happen in my life, I couldn't spend all that time playing video games. But one of my favorite games then was the first Legend of Zelda. And now I have a 10-year-old son, and he's got the whole family back into gaming. And I'm playing the 19th now entry in the Zelda series. It's called Tears of the Kingdom. I missed about 14 in the middle of the series. But Tears of the Kingdom is this incredible, sprawling adventure in an open fantasy world that artistically feels like walking around in a Monet painting. And I'm not necessarily encouraging anyone to start gaming if you don't already, because it's fraught with problems. But I also think that video games have proven themselves to be a legitimate art form, and one of the few kinds of storytelling that the audience participates in, where you're the one driving the story, which I think is really interesting and full of possibility.
I have heard good things about certain video games. I haven't looked at any of them recently, and maybe when my kid is older, I will end up looking at some of them. But I know a lot of people who make music for them. And yeah, like it's definitely a whole different thing than when I was a kid in terms of there being like many aspects of super artful choices. I haven't seen them firsthand, but yes, I've heard.
Well, if you ever start to head that way and you're looking for recommendations, I'm your guy.
Okay.
Shoot me an email. Goes for all of you out there. All right. Well, Mirah Yom Tov Zaylan, it was so great having you on the show.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks so much. This was really fun.
You can find everything Mirah at mirahmusic.com. That's MIRAH music.com. There you can find her tour dates, records, t-shirts, even playing cards. I'll link to that and her social follows in the show notes. You can find her music and merch on Bandcamp and all the other streaming platforms. I'm Mohammed 7. You can find me at mohammed7.com. That's MUHAMMAD and 7 like the number, SEVEN. There you can find my music and tour dates, as well as how to get in touch if you're interested in songwriting coaching or lessons, which I offer. If you want to support the podcast, I've got a Patreon, and you can become a patron via the link on my website. If you'd like your ad to be featured at the top of the podcast, just email it in. You can find my contact info in the link tree on all the We Flew Off the Page social media pages. We're always eager for new sponsors. I'll leave you today with a quote from another of my favorite songwriters, Chris Delmhurst, who writes in the introduction of her book of sheet music, "Songs are living things. As songwriters, we incubate them through hours, weeks, or years. We arrange, dwell, fuss, scrap, overhaul, tweak, revise, give up, revisit, and finally choose the moment when they're ready to live in the world outside our imagination. Recording a song is not the final word on how it should be played, but a snapshot of a moment in the song's life. With luck, that life will continue in the ears and hearts and hands of the people it reaches." All right, folks, I'll see you back here next time on We Flew Off the Page.